Hi, welcome to Harbour's Midweek Minis. This is the third and final part of the series looking at some of the people who were at the crucifixion of Jesus. It's been called At the Cross, and this is 3 of 3, and really should be called At the Cross and At the Grave. Mainly because, of course, we're the other side of Easter, and it feels more appropriate now to look at the resurrection rather than at the crucifixion. Over the last two sessions, I've gradually focused on a small group of disciples who were drawn from the back of the crowd where they'd been hiding in fear to the foot of the cross. Jesus' mother, Mary, Jesus' aunt, mother of James and wife of Clopas, Mary Magdalene and John were drawn by love to the cross, drawn from the back of the fearful crowd, right to the foot of the cross. They couldn't keep away from their friend and teacher that they'd followed for 3 years. They'd absorbed his teaching, being part of his miracles and healings. Remember, Mary Magdalene had 7 demons expelled from her. They'd become saturated in his love and had financially supported Jesus and his disciples. They'd experienced the complete loss of all their hopes, that Jesus, their Messiah, was dying. They watched him die in agonizing pain, slowly suffocating as he pulled himself up and down on nail-impaled hands and feet, trying to breathe. Until we reached John 19, verse 30, and he said, "It is finished." Then bowing his head, he gave up his spirit. Some translations actually have the word gave up his breath, because the word there is pneuma, P-N-E-U-M-A. The Greek word, which means breath, but sometimes is translated spirit. "It is finished," he said. He gave up his breath. The whole crucifixion process was one of real slow suffocation. You're dangling from nails. Your diaphragm stretched up, so you have to force yourself to contract, pulling yourself on your nails, pulling yourself on the nails on your feet in order to try and gasp breath. And finally, you just run out of energy in pain. You suffocate. Everything was lost. Their friend, teacher, and Lord was dead. He couldn't have been the Messiah because he hadn't led them to the victory that they expected over their enemies. All hope was gone. So, Matthew 27, verses 57 to 61 says, "When it was evening, a rich man from Arimathea named Joseph came. He himself had also become a disciple of Jesus. He approached Pilate and asked for Jesus' body. Then Pilate ordered that it be released. So Joseph took the body, wrapped it in clean fine linen, and placed it in his new tomb, which he had cut into the rock. He left after rolling a great stone against the entrance of the tomb. Mary Magdalene and the other Mary were seated there, facing the tomb. Even after witnessing the death of their friend, Mary Magdalene and Mary, that's the wife of Clopas, the mother of James, were still compelled by love to follow him. They had to see where his body had been laid to rest. We can only imagine the darkness of their grief as they turned their backs on the grave that night, and the numbness of the following day, as they just existed through the Sabbath. But, and here we read Mark 16, 1-11, "When the Sabbath was over, Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James, and Salome brought spices so they could go and anoint him. Very early in the morning, on the first day of the week, they went to the tomb at sunrise. They were saying to one another, 'Who will roll the stone away from the entrance of the tomb?' Looking up, they observed that the stone, which was very large, had been rolled away already. When they entered the tomb, they saw a young man dressed in a long white robe sitting on the right side. They were amazed and alarmed. "Don't be alarmed," he told them. "You are looking for Jesus the Nazarene, who was crucified. He's been resurrected. He's not here. So see the place where they put him. But go tell his disciples and Peter, he is going ahead of you to Galilee. You will see him there, just as he told you." So they went out and started running from the tomb, because trembling and astonishment overwhelmed them, and they said nothing to anyone, since they were afraid. Early on the first day of the week, after he had risen, he appeared first to Mary Magdalene, out of whom he cast 7 demons, and she went and reported those things too about him, as they were mourning and weeping. Yet when they heard that he was alive and had seen her and seen by her, they did not believe it. As soon as they were allowed, this group of women wanted to show their final love by preparing Jesus' body for the grave. Wrapping the body in cloth and anointing it with fragrant spices was all part of the normal burial rites of the time. They'd done this so that the smell of the decomposing corpse was disguised, because for the next 7 days, friends and family would come to visit the dead person in the tomb. And the nice smelling spices were there to disguise the nasty smell of the body. But as Mary approached the tomb, they recognised they had a problem. They knew a large stone, too heavy for them to move, was stopping them from getting to the body. And here's their first surprise. Ta-da! The stone door had been rolled away. Now, this is where we hit a slight problem in our story. According to Mark, and the Marys and Salome go into the tomb, meet an angel. Well, a young man in a white robe anyway. According to Luke, it was 2 men in dazzling clothes. Matthew actually says it was an angel who, this is Matthew 28:2-3, was sitting on the stone. His appearance was like lightning and his robe was as white as snow. A comical vision, if anything else. Somebody sitting on the stone, maybe even twiddling their thumbs. But John has a completely different account. Let's read John 20, verses 1-18. On the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene came to the tomb early, while it was still dark. She saw the stone had been removed from the tomb. She ran to Simon Peter and to the other disciple, the one Jesus loved, and said to them, "They have taken the Lord out of the tomb, and we don't know where they've put him." At that, Peter and the other disciple went out, heading for the tomb. The two were running together, but the other disciple outran Peter and got to the tomb first. Stooping down, he saw the linen cloths lying there, yet he did not go in. Then following him, Simon Peter came also. He entered the tomb and saw the linen cloth lying there. The wrapping that had been on his head was not lying with the linen cloth, but was folded up separately in a place by itself. The other disciple, who had reached the tomb first, then entered the tomb and saw and believed. For they still did not understand the scripture that he must rise from the dead. Then the disciples went home again. But Mary stood outside, facing the tomb, crying. As she was crying, she stooped to look into the tomb. She saw 2 angels in white sitting there, one at the head and one at the feet, where Jesus' body had been lying. And they said to her, "Woman, why are you crying?" "Because they've taken my Lord away," she told them, "and I don't know where they put him." Having said this, she turned around and saw Jesus standing there, though she didn't know it was Jesus. "Woman," Jesus said to her, "why are you crying? Who is it you're looking for?" Supposing he was a gardener, she replied, "Sir, if you've removed him, tell me where you've put him, and I will take him away." Jesus said to her, "Mary." Turning around, she said to him in Hebrew, "Rabboni," which means teacher. "Don't cling to me," Jesus told her, "for I have not yet ascended to the Father. Go to my brothers and tell them that I am ascending to my Father and your Father, to my God and your God." Mary Magdalene went and announced to the disciples, "I've seen the Lord," and she told them what he had said to her. This seems like a very different account from Matthew, Mark and Luke. And it is different, but it is not contradictory. I'll say it again. There are differences in the gospel accounts of the resurrection, and there are some other differences as well in other places, but they do not contradict each other. Rather, they complement each other by giving us a different view of the same event. Apparently, our police get really suspicious when eyewitnesses of a crime give exactly the same account. To the police, it sounds like the eyewitnesses have got together and have agreed what they're going to say. And obviously this would discredit them as witnesses. Our police would far rather have witnesses giving slightly different details, depending on what they actually saw, what they actually remembered, and how they interpreted what they saw as being important or not important. The gospel writers had different sources and spoke to different witnesses, hence they had different accounts. Added to this, the people directly involved in the story would have been traumatized by the violent death of their friend. Many people have attempted to join the gospel accounts together in a process called harmonization. I think George Eldon Ladd's harmonization in "I Believe in the Resurrection of Jesus" is a really good example. So, ready or not, here we go with my version of his harmonization. 1. An earthquake took place, removing the stone. Matthew 28:2, Mark 16:4, Luke 24:2. A group of women came early to the tomb, wondering who would move the stone. As they approached, they were amazed to see that the stone had already been rolled away. Matthew 28:1, Mark 16:1, John 20:1. Mary rushes off at this point to tell Peter and John that the body of Jesus has been stolen. John 20, verse 2. The other women, that's Mary Clopas and Salome and whoever else might have been with them, stay in the garden. They enter the tomb and are met by one or two angels who tell them to carry word of the resurrection to the disciples. That's Matthew 28 verses 2 to 4, Mark 16:5 and Luke 24 verse 4. The women rush away from the garden filled with mingled emotions of fear and joy, but speak to no one about the vision of the angels at the empty tomb. Mark 16 verse 8. Later in the day, Jesus met them. Matthew 28:9 does not say that this meeting occurred in the garden, just says that Jesus met them. Then they had run away from the tomb. Jesus tells them to bear the word to the disciples. They depart to find the disciples who are not together but scattered. Matthew 26:56. Peter and John, having been informed by Mary, come to the tomb after the women have left. They see the clothes lying there, folded neatly, and a vague comprehension dawns on John. That's the bit about he saw and believed. And they rush off to gather the disciples. That's John 20, verses 3 to 8. Mary then returns to the tomb, and after Peter and John have left, they had run to the tomb ahead of her, of course, John 20 verses 4, leaving Mary behind. She still thinks the body has been stolen. She's weeping outside the tomb, knowing nothing of the experience of the women who'd been left in the garden. She then sees two angels. Might have been the same two that the women were seen beforehand. Don't know. And then finally Jesus. John 20 verses 11 to 17. After the first shock of amazement had worn off, the women find some of the disciples, and the disciples cannot believe the fanciful story. Luke 24 verse 11. The disciples gather again, and finally Mary arrives and tells her experience of seeing the risen Lord. John 20 verse 18. I'm glad that's recorded because I wouldn't want to try remembering it again. Now the differences are out of the way. I want to get to the really important part of the story. Let's get back to Mary Magdalene. According to John, Mary Magdalene was so distressed by the appearance of Jesus' body, by the disappearance of Jesus' body, that she left the other women and ran to tell Peter and John. She was convinced that somebody had stolen Jesus' body. We have no idea why she thought that, but that was what was there. Jesus had so many enemies, maybe they thought, I don't know. Anyway, John 20 verse 2 says, this is what she says, "They have taken the Lord out of the tomb and we don't know where they have put him." When she got back to the tomb, the other women had already gone, and so had Peter and John. But Mary didn't know any of the things that they had seen. She still thought Jesus' body had been stolen. So distraught was she that even the appearance of two angels couldn't change her mind. We reach that in John 20, verses 11 to 13. But Mary stood outside facing the tomb crying. As she was crying, she stooped to look into the tomb. She saw two angels in white sitting there, one at the head and one at the feet where Jesus' body had been lying. They said to her, "Woman, why are you crying?" "Because they've taken my Lord," she told them, "and I don't know where they put him." The darkness of her despair had blinded her. But she was about to encounter the living light of the world. John 20 verses 14 to 18. She turned around and saw Jesus standing there, though she did not know it was Jesus. "Woman," Jesus said to her, "why are you crying? Who is it you're looking for?" Supposing he was the gardener, she replied, "Sir, if you've removed him, tell me where you've put him, and I will take him away." Jesus said, "Mary." Turning around, she said to him in Hebrew, "Rabboni," which means teacher. "Don't cling to me," Jesus told her, "for I have not yet ascended to the Father, but go to my brothers and tell them that I have ascended to my Father and your Father, to my God and your God." Mary Magdalene went and announced to the disciples, "I've seen the Lord." And she told them what he had said to her. Mary Magdalene was the first person to see the resurrected Messiah. Mary Magdalene. Why? She was doubly discounted as being a good witness, at least at that time. Why doubly discounted? She would have been a poor witness because she was a woman. I can hear some of you hissing at me at this point. But please remember, this was another time and another culture. Women were not considered good witnesses in a court of law. The second reason was her mental health history. Remember, she'd been possessed, or at least had 7 demons inside of her. Now, anyone who was controlled by 7 demons was not going to be in a rational state of mind. Well, not until Jesus had freed her. But, and here's the big but, despite that, Jesus chose to reveal himself as the resurrected Lord to Mary Magdalene. And do you know something? He wants to do the same thing for you. He wants to reveal himself as the resurrected Lord. He wants to give you fresh revelation of who he is. I know Easter's past, but will you follow the example of John and the Marys? Will you linger a bit longer at the foot of the cross? Will you allow yourself to be drawn to the grave? Will you spend some time contemplating, thinking through what Jesus actually has done for us? And he will reveal his resurrection life to us in a fresh new way. Happy Easter. Thankfully, Jesus has risen. See you soon.